Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ready to Go webinar, State and Local Efforts Advancing Energy Efficiency. My name is Jasmine. I'm a research analyst at ACEEE. I'm also a co-author of the Ready to Go toolkit. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers today. First is Amanda Dewey, senior research analyst at ACEEE, who was also the lead author of the Ready to Go toolkit. Next, we have Dave Epley, the Associate Director of the District of Columbia's Department of Energy and Environment. We also have Vicki Hackett, the Deputy Commissioner of Energy at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And finally, we have Trisha Miller, the Chief Innovation and Development Officer at Elevate. And as a reminder, you can use the chat feature to submit your questions to these speakers. And with that, we will first hear from Amanda. Amanda, you can talk now.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us. And before I get started presenting our research, I'm going to briefly introduce my colleague, Brian Howard, who is the director of the State Policy Program, to give you a quick welcome.
Thanks so much, Amanda, and really appreciate everybody's participation and joining today. It's great to see so many names and familiar faces in the chat, and looking forward to engaging with y'all during this conversation. We have a great panel, and I don't want to hold up much, but I just did want to say a few brief things about the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. We were founded in 1980. We do best practice research on energy efficiency topics across the state, local, international, and national levels on a number of different areas, including utilities, buildings, transportation, industry, and behavior. We do a lot of work that is continuing through the rest of the year. We have some great webinars upcoming, including our State Energy Efficiency Scorecard, which will be happening next week. If you're not already following us in terms of some of the various different mediums that we provide really great updates through our email newsletter and through social media. So please feel free to subscribe or follow us where you can. But again, really excited about this panel and looking forward to talking with you all a little bit as we go. So back to you, Amanda.
Thanks so much, Brian, and thank you, Jasmine. And I just want to echo the thanks to all of you for joining us today. We're excited to share this research with you at a really exciting time, we think, for federal opportunities for cities and states. So just to ground the work that we did on this toolkit, we set out earlier this year, a few months ago now, to support state and local governments in making the most of upcoming major opportunities available with federal funding. So we all know with COVID relief, with infrastructure initiatives, some potential future initiatives coming around the bend at the federal level, it's an exciting time for cities and states to take advantage of federal funding. But we know that's easier said than done. So what we wanted to do was support cities and states in making the most of this opportunity and doing so equitably and effectively when they're using federal funds for clean energy and energy efficiency. So we approached this project in a few ways. We used our internal research canon, and we used research and input from a few partners. Specifically, I'll call out the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, the National Association of State Energy Officials, and the Emerald Cities Collaborative, as well as the National League of Cities, all of whom supported us in this research and provided feedback. And from all these sources, we got quite a significant population of exciting and innovative clean energy programs at city and state levels. And from that larger list, we narrowed down the work to 17 programs, 10 at the local level, 7 at the state level. And you can see here just a quick map that shows how those are distributed across the country. And when we were sort of narrowing down this list, we looked at a few key guiding considerations for which programs that we wanted to feature across the toolkit. And we prioritized a few things. First being prioritization of equity, right? We know that there's an increasing focus on making sure that the burdens and the benefits of energy transitions and energy efficiency are evenly distributed across communities, right? Making sure that the most marginalized communities are no longer left out of the benefits of so many of these energy programs. So we really looked for programs that intentionally targeted equity and showed them best practices and equitable approaches. We also looked for programs that had clearly defined goals and metrics for their work to sort of support accountability in that way, high energy and emissions savings potential, replicability for other governments and stakeholders. We wanted this to be useful for other governments, so we kept that in mind when we were selecting which programs to feature. Scale of impact, and a strong alignment with climate goals. And then finally, we looked for programs that had some workforce development outcomes and that specifically focused on workforce development in the work. And in addition to sort of these guiding priorities, we also wanted to highlight a diversity of programs in terms of geography, in terms of sector, to maximize the utility of the toolkit. Our goal was that all governments would be able to look at this resource and find something useful that they could learn from. And so we think we've achieved that, and we're excited to share it with you. And from these 17 strong programs, through conversations with those program designers and implementers and publicly available information and literature, we found some really key guiding principles and lessons learned from those programs. So first, we highlight those in the toolkit, and we identified 6 that emerged from this research. First being conducting rigorous public engagement processes, those that are meaningful and not transactional, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Defining the benefits, especially non-energy benefits that are being targeted in the work. Using a data-driven approach and setting goals and being accountable throughout the duration of a program. And then we also learned that building in flexibility to respond to changing context and feedback is important, as well as coordinating between programs, maximizing comprehensiveness and effectiveness in that way. And so from these lessons that we learned from our model programs, we have some key recommendations that we make to all governments as they're attempting to either expand or deploy a new program. And the first is to meaningfully engage with the community, especially marginalized populations within a given jurisdiction during the design process and throughout the program's duration. So this is really important both for having a successful program with high participation rates, but also to make sure that you're not causing or exacerbating harms and inequities within the community. We also recommend governments to consider and define all benefits, including non-energy benefits. We all know that energy efficiency and clean energy has benefits, including bill savings, including health and safety, including economic and workforce development. And that differs depending on context. So we encourage governments to define their goals in this way and what benefits they're looking for. And that way they can use that to track their progress and also better communicate about their programs. We recommend that governments use reliable data and clearly defined goals to support accountability and communicate their program outcomes. We know this is easier said than done, especially for smaller governments. Data collection and analysis can be really challenging. It can pose capacity challenges, resource constraints. So we want to make very clear that when we recommend a data-driven approach, this can look a lot of different ways. Even a smaller scale data collection or qualitative data collection can provide important feedback and a mechanism for accountability, even things like focus groups. So depending on how this looks in your community, in your jurisdiction, there's always a way to use data to maintain accountability and communicate about how your program is going. We also suggest building in flexibility to respond to changing context and community feedback. As just one example of how context can change, we know that these federal opportunities are changing and they can come up sort of unexpectedly. We don't always know what the details of them will look like. So building a program and an approach that has some mechanism for flexibility and for changing in response to context like that or feedback from the community is really important. And then finally, we recommend streamlining opportunities by combining or coordinating with similar existing programs. So this could mean creating a one-stop shop approach by building on to a program or agency that already exists. But at the very least, we learned from the successful programs that coordinating across agencies, across entities is really, really important for being effective and for making sure that you're making the most out of your resources when you're implementing these clean energy initiatives. So we were really grateful for all of the feedback we got from program staff that helped us to distill down these key recommendations and lessons. But I argue that the gold of this toolkit is in our 17 programs that we feature because they offer so many really interesting and innovative approaches. And I think there's sort of something for everybody here. You're going to hear about a few of those from our other speakers that I'm so thrilled to have joining us today. But I want to highlight just a few other programs that we have in the toolkit that we're not going to be talking about later in this webinar, just to give you a sense of what this toolkit looks like. The first one I'll highlight is the Renew program being run by the Emerald Cities Collaborative. And this is a program that focuses on energy efficiency in multifamily buildings housing low-income residents. This is a tough sector for folks to reach. This is a difficult sort of demographic. There's all sorts of resource constraints and split incentive problems that make it difficult to have really meaningful energy efficiency or upgrades in the affordable multifamily sector. And this approach really used a flexible and tech agnostic way to find the best solution for each property and realized a lot of savings in both energy and bill savings for these customers, reducing energy burden. And so we highlight this as an approach that governments could use, and especially modeling this flexible sort of one-stop shop approach as a way to reduce barriers, to create the best possible solutions for any individual building owner, and really be more effective in a hard-to-reach sector. The second program I'll highlight is the Minneapolis Green Zones Initiative. And this is a process by which the city of Minneapolis directs their resources to environmental justice communities. The way this approach works is that the city identified 2 geographic areas in their community that were disproportionately exposed to environmental harms and environmental burdens. And then each of these 2 geographic areas had a task force of residents who created a priority list and an action plan for tackling these problems in their community. And the city targeted the resources to those communities. And again, the work was led by the residents themselves. And so we raised this up as a model that governments can follow for targeting their resources to the areas of the community that need it most. The third program I'm going to briefly highlight is the Energy Fit Philly program. This program was run in Philadelphia by the Energy Coordinating Agency in the city in partnership with several community-based organizations in Philadelphia. And the big takeaway here is that in tackling low-income housing, this approach used a block-by-block process and retrofitted entire blocks in sort of a neighborhood style when they were doing their retrofit work in the community. And so rather than taking a home-by-home approach where there's a lot of challenges, this really helped them to reach more homes. And what they found was that they were able to preserve existing affordable housing, avoid displacement, and really improve health and safety in areas and homes that had a lot of safety and health hazards going on. And so this worked with a contest structure where there would be a block captain. You can see one pictured here, Darlene Pope. And that block captain would get together with their neighbors. They would apply to have their block considered. And then a block would be selected, and every home on the block would receive retrofits and weatherization. And so this, again, improved health outcomes and preserved this housing and preserved these communities. And so we suggest that other governments can consider a block by block or a neighborhood approach. And then the final program I'm going to just briefly mention today is the Massachusetts Green Communities Program. And this is a state program that supports municipalities in their energy projects in public buildings. And so it requires municipalities to become certified as a green community, and then municipalities become eligible for technical assistance and other support for their projects in places like schools, wastewater facilities, and other buildings. And we really highlight the work on schools here because it's a very important sector that they've had a lot of success in this program. And so we recommend that governments might consider how they can use a combination of certification and support in order to sort of create more accountability, as well as considering how other public buildings could be reached with an effort like this. And I'll just say thank you so much again for joining us. You'll hear some more about some great programs for our speakers today. I hope you'll check out the full toolkit. We'll make sure that link is put in the chat. And we also have a new interactive map tool where you can click around and get details on all 17 programs that we featured in a different format. So thanks again for being here. We look forward to sharing more with you. And I'll turn it back over to Jasmine.
Thank you, Amanda, for that overview of our research toolkit. Our next speaker today is Dave Epley, who will share with us his work from the District of Columbia. He, as I mentioned earlier, he is the Associate Director of the DC Department of Energy and Environment and manages their Green Building Division. Dave, you can present now.
Hi, how's it going? We'll pull up my PowerPoint here. While I'm doing that, thank you so much to ACEEE for having me on such an illustrious panel. Quite the honor. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit today about what we are calling our Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator, which we actually just launched yesterday, which is pretty exciting. It's also very exciting because I can speak openly about it today with y'all. So excellent timing. Very well. I don't think we can necessarily have a conversation about the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator without talking about BEPS first, so our Building Energy Performance Standards. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about this, but we had a local law was passed in 2018, the Clean Energy DC Omnibus Amendment Act, which Clean Energy DC is like our comprehensive energy plan in DC, and it established the Building Energy Performance Standards for DC. The statute required that we then go on and make regulations, but it did specify that there's multiple cycles of BEPS, as you can kind of see here, each one happening every 6 years, and basically addresses energy efficiency or energy use in existing buildings. It's an outcome-based standard as opposed to like a design and construction standard that you would see with your codes. So it's really about outcome performance. It's all built off our energy benchmarking program that we've been running for over a decade now. BEPS 1 applies to buildings 50,000 square feet or greater, private buildings, and then also applies to DC-owned buildings 10,000 square feet or greater. And so, jump ahead. So the way that it works is that we set the standard, which we actually set back in January 1st of this calendar year. And if you are below the standard, your building is below that standard, then you have to seek a compliance pathway to come into compliance. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. I'm not going to get into that today just because it's a little more detail than we have time for. But just so you know, the standard was set based on our analysis of all the buildings in that type. As you can see, there's many different types. I think over 40 different building types that are 50,000 square feet or greater in DC. And so based on that, when we had a local median available, working off the Energy Star Portfolio Manager score, when we didn't have that available, we worked off like a source EUI, and we defined that. And then we basically had about 900 buildings that fell into not meeting the BEPS standards, and thus they need to seek compliance over the next 6 years. We gave it actually an extra year for compliance because of COVID. I'll jump back. I just want to say, like the BEPS program is a real milestone for DC unto itself. We just recently published our regulations, like our operation regulations, and a bunch of different guidance documents around that. Hopefully in the month, we're going to have our guidebook and our cost benefit analysis study out too. We launched like our compliance framework on our back end, which uses BEAM, B-E-A-M, which is a tool that Department of Energy has put together. And then we were supported by NEEP to sort of work through that and develop that tool. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that's happening and just a lot of things kind of coming together. It's very exciting. We've been working for many years on it. So let's get to the ARPA piece. So DC was given a large chunk of ARPA funding this past year, and district agencies were encouraged to apply for ways to use those funds. So, thinking about these 900 buildings that do not meet the BEPS standards and need to do energy efficiency measures over the next 5 to 6 years, to the tune of like at the max to like 20% energy savings, maybe some as low as like 5 to 10, depending on where they're at. But significant. And so we were like, okay, well, how do we, thinking through the lens of equity, like which buildings are going to need the most support, and can we use the ARPA funds to support them? So we identified potentially under-resourced buildings, and this is not a defined term. It's just, buildings that are going to have trouble maybe getting capital financing up front or even on the back end. And we identified those, and then we sort of put a proposal specifically around affordable housing buildings, which there's 140 roughly of those. And that number keeps shifting a little bit, actually, because we're still discovering new buildings that might fly. And then also affordability shifts, and I'll get into this in a second. This applies to what we call our naturally occurring affordable housing. But we also looked like public schools, houses of worship, public universities, hospitals, senior care facilities, Class B, C, office buildings. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot going on. And I'll mention, we talk about community engagement as a best practice. This is, we were able to move quickly on this program because for many years now, we've been really working and engaged with the affordable housing sector. We've had, a BEPS task force and a subcommittee focused on affordable housing. NHT, National Housing Trust, ran a group affordable housing experts to talk about this. We actually even hired someone to focus specifically, an FTE on affordable housing and BEPS in existing buildings. So that sort of allowed us to move quickly because we've been doing the outreach and engagement up until this point. We identified the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, which is a contractor for DC. They run our energy efficiency programs, and the DC Green Bank, both to establish institutions in the district to help us make this happen and move quickly to do the work. So, so in FY22, which started October 1st of this year, for us, we received $35 million to stand up this affordable housing retrofit accelerator program. And we also kind of projected out years 23, 24, 25, FY23, 24, 25, thinking about how we will use this for money. We anticipate getting funds as we move forward to, particularly after a successful FY22. So we broke these down into 3 different types of buildings of this 140, 3 types of affordable housing. There's our covenanted affordable housing, basically buildings that have received assistance from the district at some point in time, and they're required to maintain affordability as a covenant on the property. And so there's that group of buildings. You mentioned as a mid-cycle here, which basically means they're not at the end of their financing cycle. They're like their 15-year period. They're not ready to go back for more money. So they're sort of in this point where they need funds to do this in a very specific way. They're not able to go get additional capital. So this is a group that we're targeting with this first 10 million. We have 60 naturally occurring affordable housing buildings, and that kind of the funding breakdown here is between pre-development energy audit work and then construction loans, working with the Green Bank on that. And then we had some additional local dollars that we kind of put into that. And then we had our public housing. So public housing is this kind of its own category. There's a chunk of funds going to them to stand up a team over there focused on green building sustainability broadly, and then also specifically on BEPS. And then we received administrative support for the agency. We have 4 FTEs and then funding for those folks as we go forward. And we anticipate the same amount, hopefully in FY23, we'll see. Sorry, a cat is here, if you heard noises. So we released it yesterday. So the Affordable Housing Retrofit Accelerator, very exciting. I can put this in the chat here in a minute. There's actually made a really fun video, which looks like that you can watch. It kind of gives a great overview of it. So there's a lot of collateral online, a lot of things you can dive into. And just in general, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know. This is an evolving, very flexible conversation. We're sort of laying the track as we move our train down the track. It's happening very quickly, and it's a lot of things happening. So there'll be more updates every day, every week, every month as we go forward. For the FY22, though, here's sort of a quick look at what it actually might look like. We had our kind of a soft launch where we reached out to our building owners we identified initially. Yesterday, we had our press release. We have an application due date of January 15th, which is to encourage people to go ahead and apply. One of the challenges with these types of programs is spending the money, and so we had to kind of set firm deadlines to get people to apply and to be interested. So hopefully we get everyone involved, but all the 140 buildings. But if not, we're gonna have to make some decisions quickly and move forward. There's also foundational education piece around this. There's understanding BEPS, understanding energy in your building and energy use, good O&M, all the different things that empower building owners to then go ahead and not just do the installation and walk away, but do the installation and sort of change culture and get where they need to be for many years to come. There's the implementation piece. Compliance with BEPS is a thread that runs through this. Monitoring data. We actually just hired a data coordinator position, which I'm really excited about, to really take and monitor and build and get really robust data and sort of our enterprise software, manage all that. So really exciting there. So this is sort of what it's going to look like. There's just a few details. I won't get into much. I'm going to hand over in a second, but mentioned January 15th as a deadline. There's some pretty specific eligibility requirements, particularly around affordable housing. So, we're going to do the verification there and, look at rent rolls and all that type of stuff that goes in to verify the use of this funds. It is federal funding. So there's a lot of, you want to make sure that you're really doing it right. We're building in, a third-party audit to the program and other pieces like that as well. Just, an EM&V part, a third-party EM&V audit. So just making sure that everything kind of lines up. So I'm going to stop there. We'll take questions at the end. And that's it for me. There's some links that you can go to. If you have any questions, building.performance@dc.gov is a great place to reach out to. And then we have some live websites now. So thank you again to ACEEE for having me.
Thank you, Dave, for that presentation.
Yeah.
Our next speaker today will be Vicki Hackett. She is the Deputy Commissioner of Energy at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and she leads her department's energy branch. Vicki, great having you. Looking forward to your presentation.
Great, thank you so much.
But also like to remind participants that you're free to leave comments in the chat and ask questions to our speakers.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. And really great presentations so far. I think David and I have a lot to talk about after today's webinar. So I'm Vicki Hackett. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Energy at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. And I actually want to go back to the first slide here. So we're really happy to be here to talk about what we're doing on the federal funding front on building decarbonization and energy affordability and equity. And very similar type approach to what you just saw from David. So first, I just want to give a little bit of an overview of what we're doing with our existing efficiency programs, because I think, that really has an impact on, how, what we're going to build upon using federal funding, and in particular, ARPA funding, which is what I'll be focused on today. So we have established energy efficiency programs here in Connecticut, including our conservation and load management programs that are administered by our utilities. The proposed 2022 to 2024 conservation and load management plan is pending before us right now for review. It's a $707 million investment in energy efficiency over 3 years and demand response as well. And the priorities for this plan are equity, decarbonization, and energy affordability. The programs within the plan create and support 36,000 jobs in Connecticut annually and have a total lifetime savings of 55.5 million MMBTUs and 5.1 million tons of reduced carbon emissions. The flagship program for our conservation and load management programs for residential customers is our Home Energy Solutions program. It's a comprehensive approach, including in the first visit, a blower door test and a significant amount of weather sealing, as well as some other measures in that initial visit. And during that visit, an audit is also performed to help identify measures for follow-up. For folks who are income eligible or live in certain areas, qualifying census tracts, the Home Energy Solutions program is free and provides services valued at $1,150 on average. We're hoping to increase that with increased adoption of insulation, and we'll talk more about how we're going to do that, with savings averaging around $250 a year. For income eligible families, many of the add-on services, such as insulation, are free or extremely low cost. For folks who aren't income eligible, there's a copay for participating, which is $50, with similar resulting savings. The savings vary depending on the number of measures that people complete in their homes, and Home Energy Solutions customers can receive rebates of up to $1.70 per square foot on approved insulation projects. And that covers more than the material cost generally. The total cost depends on vendor labor charges. Increasing the number of HESIE insulation projects is a priority for us in our 2022 to 2024 CNLM plan, and that's also going to be reflected in the ARPA programs that we're going to discuss today. So we also have our Weatherization Assistance program. Within that, and that's the federally funded program through DOE. And within that, DEEP is fostering improvements to ease current barriers to implementation and help support anticipated increased funding levels, including running an RFP for additional service providers to expand the scope of the program. The WAP program has really terrific potential for increased federal funding, including the infrastructure bill that doubled the annual budget for 5 years. We're also leveraging LIHEAP funding that can be used to supplement the Weatherization Assistance program, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we work through the upcoming slides. So this is a description of our ARPA programs that we are in the process of moving forward with. So the first program is our efficiency energy retrofit for affordable housing program. And what we're really looking to do with this program is knit together all of the available incentives through the programs I just talked about, right? Our conservation and load management and weatherization assistance programs, but also all of the other existing programs in Connecticut, which include rooftop solar programs, which were the rooftop solar tariff. We amended the tariff in the last legislative session so that it would apply. The benefits of rooftop solar could apply not just to building owners, but also to tenants in multi-unit dwellings with more than 4 units. And we also have Share Clean Energy Facilities program, EV charging program under development for residential customers, storage programs under development. And all of these programs have a Justice 40 component. So what we're looking to do with this first ARPA program is identify shovel-ready or near shovel-ready projects, many of which have already been identified through our conservation and load management pipeline, that to do more comprehensive energy retrofits and take things beyond those initial visits, and do increased amounts of insulation, but also, bring the distributed energy resources to bear, and to really knit everything together, and then identify remaining barriers to implementation for residents in affordable housing. The health and safety barrier remediation program is somewhat self-explanatory. I think many of us are familiar with the issue. In Connecticut, it's a really big issue of homes having barriers to being able to implement energy efficiency and other energy retrofit programs, including asbestos, lead in some cases, mold, vermiculite. So we're knitting together various funding sources, including LIHEAP funding, ARPA funding, and a small amount of SEP funding to create a health and safety barrier remediation program. And we also have a curb-to-home broadband build-out program. And we see these things as all working together in sort of a comprehensive approach. Because, as we know, you can't really engage with a modern electric grid if you don't have decent access to broadband in the home. So, we see that as being integral to the rest of the energy retrofit program. So moving on to more specifics about the energy efficiency retrofit for affordable housing program. So, we've identified that, there's a need to reduce the energy burden, to improve indoor living spaces and health, to decarbonize the building sector, and to address the barriers that exist for renters, for example, and for, again, those with health and safety barriers that prevent weatherization in a large percentage of our homes, especially in Connecticut. So ARPA funds are well suited to meeting this need, given their need to be focused on those disproportionately impacted by COVID. So what we also did was we institutionalized the energy affordability retrofit program within Public Act 21-48 with broad support from the legislature and the governor. And as you can see here, the goals we discussed before are reflected in the Public Act. The definition of affordable housing in the Public Act is broad, and DEEP has discretion, to implement a definition and our goal would be to do so in a way that works with all of our other existing programs, so that we can streamline eligibility. And so if people are eligible for the income eligible program for home energy solutions, or for the weatherization assistance program, or for other utility assistance programs, we would make them automatically eligible for the energy retrofit for affordable housing program as well. But we'll be working through the definition of what affordable housing is through a process that will be upcoming. So the way that we see this working for the energy retrofit for affordable housing program is really sort of addressing the customer journey through all of our available programs. It can be really overwhelming to participate in multiple programs with perhaps different program administrators or operators. It can become a real burden to navigate for building owners or homeowners. And we know that people don't have time to comb through the sort of all the resources that are available to them to leverage these existing opportunities. Energy retrofits are complicated at every phase, and we really need to have a coordinated approach. So the way that we're looking at this is to have the pre-phase, which is the customer onboarding and work scoping. We can do that largely through our existing conservation and load management program and weatherization assistance program, which have that initial home visit where we identify sort of all of the things that are available to be done in that home. And expanding upon that to include EV charging, solar, and storage and other resources is one of the goals of the program. And then we have the prep phase, which will include identifying and addressing the health and safety barriers. We'll talk more about that program in a minute. Then the weatherization phase, which takes place through the conservation and load management and the weatherization assistance program. And then finally, the retrofit phase, which would include, where possible, the installation of rooftop solar, energy storage, EV charging, conversion to heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, broadband installation, fiber installation, and more. So that's what we're developing for the Affordable Housing Energy Retrofit Program. We're in the process of hiring our office director. We created a new office for this program, and we're just really excited about moving forward with that. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the health and safety barrier remediation program. So almost a third of low-income homes are prevented from participating in energy efficiency programs in Connecticut due to the presence of health and safety barriers such as asbestos, mold, lead, vermiculite, among other things. DEEP is leveraging up to $12 million in federal funding to create a new program to remediate these barriers for low-income customers so that they can go on to participate in the HES-IE or the Weatherization Assistance Program. What happens right now is in the initial visit, through either of those programs, there's sort of an audit of whether any of those barriers are existing in the home. And if they do, the service providers do not move forward with the blower door test or other measures until the health and safety barriers are remediated. So, we do have a pipeline. We have sort of a backlog of homes that need to have their weatherization needs and other needs addressed. So, we'll be able to turn to that pipeline to begin to address this. So DEEP is in the process of selecting a program operator for this through a competitive RFP. We're in the process now. We had a bidders conference. We're in the process of finalizing responses to questions, which I believe we're issuing tomorrow. The program aims to serve at least 200 homes in the first 12 months of operation, and we're hoping to have it operational by the end of, I believe, the end of the first quarter of 2022. And now I'll just talk a little bit about our Curb to Home program for broadband. So this is a $15 million grant program to connect low-income residents to broadband infrastructure or to replace outdated wiring to allow for higher quality service. There's a larger initiative underway in Connecticut. We've established a new telecom and broadband office within DEEP, within our Bureau of Energy and Technology Policy, which before now has been focused almost exclusively on energy. We are now going to have an office that is focused on broadband. There's a lot of crossover between energy and broadband, especially on the infrastructure side. So we're really excited about this. We're in the process of hiring for this new office, and this will help us to implement a very large amount of federal funding that is coming our way. in coordination with other state agencies, including the Office of Policy and Management, which is going to retain the GIS mapping function to help us identify the areas that are most in need for higher quality broadband access. And we have pockets of Connecticut that don't really have broadband access. So we'll be identifying that through GIS mapping. And moving forward with implementation, we're exploring a variety of ways to do that. But one of the ways through the ARPA funding is this $15 million grant program. And it will promote digital equity by granting approximately 10 to 15,000 low-income residents in under-resourced communities access to remote education, work, and healthcare opportunities and smart energy tools for the future. And as I said earlier, I think, as most of us are aware, if we're looking to do energy retrofits in affordable housing, which we are, and we want to bring all of the benefits of the clean energy economy to those who have been underserved and under-resourced, we can't do it without having good access to broadband. So, these programs are really going to work hand in hand. And that doesn't mean they'll be exclusive, but certainly in coordination with each other. We're also very focused with all of these programs on workforce development, equitable workforce development. We're working on building. There's a lot of coalition building that needs to be done as we work through all of this. Breaking down of silos. I think it's just so important. We've come a long way. I've been working in energy in Connecticut since 2006. We've had sort of these great programs in place, such as solar tariff and our energy efficiency programs. We've had programs in place for a long time that are sort of operating on their own, but it's really just evident that we need to bring everything together and start working on comprehensive approaches and encouraging people to really engage with a modernized electric grid in a way that provides equitable benefits to all. So, and that's it. Happy to take questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Vicki, for your presentation. Our final speaker today is Trisha Miller, who is the Chief Innovation and Development Officer at Elevate, and she works in national U.S. climate policy. Trisha, I'm excited to hear your presentation today.
Great, thank you. What a pleasure to be with all of you today. I know we're short on time, so I'm going to try and go quickly because I saw some great questions already coming through in the chat. I'm Trisha Miller. I'm at Elevate, where we are working to ensure that everyone has access to clean and affordable heat, power, and water in their homes and communities. And a big focus for us is centering equity in the conversation on climate action. We've been in the role as a service provider, working in partnership with affordable housing developers and public agencies and nonprofit community-based organizations to advance energy retrofits and green and healthy home interventions for over 2 decades now. Our programs really run the gamut from clean energy deployment to efficiency, electrification, and workforce development. So it's exciting to hear from Vicki and Dave about the great work that's happening on the ground in Connecticut and DC, covering both the fundamentals like broadband access to braiding different resources to meet the needs of comprehensive retrofit strategies. And that's where we're seeing the need to take advantage of the market demand across a range of affordable housing types. I saw Hal mention in the chat the need to focus on vulnerable housing units, including NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing. Couldn't agree more, and that's part of the universe of buildings that we touch in our service delivery model. Today, I was asked to talk to you about some of the changing federal landscape and opportunities to hit the ground running with current investments coming into fore on the infrastructure package that was signed into law last month, and then the opportunity to engage in pending legislation. So hopefully we'll see some action on Build Back Better, maybe around Christmas time. So I'll highlight those as well as some examples for of a state climate equity policy that we were involved in. So in a nutshell, you've got, as Vicki and Dave talked about weatherization, the opportunity to really scale up weatherization interventions and address some of the preconditions for weatherization with health and safety measures. The 3.5 billion being allocated on our infrastructure, certainly an opportunity to take a more comprehensive approach and really scale up the level of energy efficiency investments in our housing stock. We're excited to see this expansion. We also see the need for better coordination and alignment between the public agencies and the weatherization assistance providers on the ground. Some of the other hallmarks of infrastructure bill in the building space is around the state energy program and the energy efficiency conservation block grants. So as Dave and Vicki shared, being able to leverage the different public agency dollars and resources in a way that can provide more of a one-stop for an affordable housing owner, a community-based group, is so critical. And we're seeing this in Chicago and across the Midwest, that it's lowering the barriers to access is a key component, as is being able to braid different funding streams to take a more comprehensive approach to energy and climate investments in underserved communities. This slide is probably very familiar to the ACEEE audience. We are absolutely focused on how federal dollars and programs can lead towards building decarbonization and ensuring that affordable housing is at the tip of the spear with new public investment. We're excited about some of the provisions in Build Back Better that expand the pool of resources, or will expand the pool of resources to meeting the needs of underserved communities. And just looking across the country at over 45 million low-income households, and the number of appliances that will need to be replaced, the number of interventions in the form of energy efficiency upgrades and retrofits is pretty overwhelming. It's also a great opportunity to replicate models like the ones in Connecticut and DC and in the ACEEE toolkit to be able to reach the magnitude of carbon reductions and energy and cost savings for our most underserved communities. In the Build Back Better Act, there are many different provisions I could talk about, but in just a couple of minutes, I was going to highlight that some of the $550 billion that are being allocated towards climate and energy related provisions represents the largest single public investment in our nation's history in combating climate change. It's more than 6 times the amount of funding that we saw under the American Recovery Act under ARA. So, this is kind of a daunting number, and it can help us accelerate the level of direct investment and partnership opportunities to be able to tackle the climate crisis and put our public dollars to work in terms of expanding opportunities for BIPOC communities and contractors, as well as supporting some of the mainstay energy programs and layering in some new opportunities for public investment. A couple examples I wanted to share. One is that it's being called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. It was formerly the Clean Energy Accelerator or the National Green Bank, but this is really a dedicated funding stream to support the green banks represented in DC and in Connecticut, across the country. We're hopeful that we'll see some of this funding ultimately make it through and be able to provide seed capital to support local and regional green banks. There's also some targeted provisions around this new funding stream that would ensure 40% or more of the benefits of new capital funding going into green banks support Justice 40. So that's another key element of centering equity in public and private investment in climate action. we were really thrilled to see the work that ACEEE has led around Hope for Homes to support additional residential energy efficiency programs and workforce to the tune of about $6 billion in the current version of Build Back Better. That paired with a complementary provision on residential electrification are really exciting. We've never seen a federal rebate program that's focused on deploying heat pump technologies and other electrification upgrades. So being able to pair efficiency incentives alongside federal electrification rebates can really go a long way. And then there's a new program that would be authorized for HUD to replicate at a much larger scale a green retrofit program, alongside some important dollars going into code updates. So that is just a snapshot of Build Back Better. One of the areas that I was meant to talk to is the linkage between federal, state, and local when it comes to equity. You see a lot of the examples for solid policies in the ACEEE toolkit and programs led by colleagues like Dave and Vicki. I think we're excited in the Midwest, where Elevate is based in Chicago, to see CJEB pass recently this fall, and that's the Illinois Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, that is not only ambitious in terms of the carbon targets, but also really accelerates the investment in clean energy jobs in communities that have been underserved in the past in terms of direct public investment and workforce development acceleration. And then I'm going to conclude with a focus on federal J40, Justice 40. So this is, a place where the White House led in the early days of the Biden administration with a commitment to Justice 40. Specifically, the Justice 40 program or policy is geared towards delivering 40% of the benefits of new federal investment in climate and clean energy in disadvantaged communities or underserved communities. Now on this slide, you'll see a range of the type of investments that are being characterized under that J40 commitment. We are already seeing programs at Department of Energy and HUD really embrace Justice 40. At the same time, we're working with organizations across the country to stand up a parallel effort, which is we're calling the Justice 40 Accelerator, to empower and lift up the voices of community leaders who have the solutions to climate, addressing the climate crisis in their communities, but have historically faced barriers to access in terms of participating in programs. So we're focused on providing grant support to Justice 40 Accelerator partners across the nation, working with a core team that you'll see on the slide from Groundswell, Hummingbird, the Partnership for Southern Equity, and the Solutions Project, to support those grantees and to shorten the distance between program design and delivery when it comes to changing the course of policy design and implementation in a way that will more positively promote and accelerate equitable climate outcomes. So with that, I'll stop and turn it over for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicki, for your presentation. Now that we've concluded all the speakers' presentations, we can turn to the question and answer part of our webinar. I believe one of the first questions that was asked in the chat was directed to Dave. This person talked about how COVID has reduced the occupancy of many commercial buildings, and that has reduced the cost effectiveness of building retrofits. And this person also highlighted the need for retrofits for NOAH properties, the vast majority of which are under 50,000 square feet. So the question is, what can be done for these most vulnerable buildings and residents?
Sure. Yeah, and Hal, great questions. Very insightful. So commercial buildings, yeah, just all buildings that energy use trends have changed a ton. So, right now with our program, with the BEPS program, we've been adjusting the baseline, the back end. We're actually using 2019 data to sort of establish our baseline, but then we're sort of looking forward and sort of analyzing trends to adjust as necessary. Just with respect to compliance with BEPS. I mean, and beyond that, I mean, it raises a lot of questions like what do cities become, and what do these buildings become if people aren't commuting in like they were? And so there's a lot of opportunities there, I think, just in general, which should be it's a whole nother webinar. But the NOAA buildings are naturally occurring affordable housing buildings. So we're the buildings are 50,000 square feet or greater. The way that we're addressing those is very much through the equity lens of bringing the ARPA dollars to, to think through how do we help these buildings come into compliance, do upgrades, how the energy efficiency upgrades overlay with like the health aspects of the buildings, but do that in a way where it doesn't push people out. Perhaps it even sort of like puts a covenant on the building going forward and sort of brings it into the fold of affordable housing. And just sort of getting through these questions about who pays for what and rent control. It's very much on our minds, and we're trying to figure that out. So we could talk more about it, and then you're right, there's tons below that. It's a huge challenge and question. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. There was another question that was directed to Vicky. This person said, we find that many of the residents from Greater Los Angeles have pre-qualified for their clean energy programs. They have roofs that need to be replaced or repaired. This person wants to know, will cool roofs be part of the retrofit process so that homeowners can actually get solar?
That's really a great idea. That's the type of thing that we'll be working through with our public process on how the energy retrofit program is going to work. But those are the types of things that's the type of feedback we're looking for in rolling this program out. And we will engage in that public process as far as what are the costs that are providing barriers to entry, and that's certainly one that's worth consideration.
Great, thank you. Since we're running toward the end of our presentation, I believe I could ask maybe just one more question directed to all the speakers. What advice would you give for folks who might be planning to use your program as an example for their own? And anybody can answer that.
I'll just start by saying, don't be afraid. You could really think that you have to have everything figured out in the beginning in order to take the first steps, and that's not really the case. I think you just have to be ready to commit and to figuring out the right answers to all of these issues as you move through the process, right? And to engage with the public in a way that's meaningful in an equitable and inclusive fashion while you do that. So, I would say, make a commitment that is broad enough that allows you to work through the details as in a systematic way.
And I would just answer it. I mean, we are a program administrator of some utility programs, and we're also serving the role at Elevate as a program implementer in other markets. So for the public agencies that are maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by the resources that I highlighted, your programs, how to run them well, and to get to scale is going to require capacity building internally, but also a level of coordination externally with partners, program implementation partners. So, being able to leverage that network and starting to think about pipeline and building a base of support for making those investments meaningful in underserved communities. You're already there, but I would double down on that, partnership angle and preparation in terms of development pipeline right now.
Yeah, I will say that the considerations that Amanda put on online, the ACEEE report, were excellent, and they really give some great advice. I would reference the ACEEE report. And then I'm serious. But yeah, I think the flexibility and just like not getting caught up in the details and moving forward and continuing to revisit and iterate and work with your constituents and the communities always kind of zooming in and out to see how your decisions are affecting issues around like health and equity, but also driving after the energy piece. It's like there's a lot happening, and also just hire a great team. You can't do any of this work without people, and so just don't ask for a lot of money and then not make space for a great team and people to bring on. So I recommend that too. Yeah.
Thank you to all our speakers today. And now that it's currently 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we're about ready to wrap up the webinar. A recording of this presentation will be made available to you within a few business days. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and thank you to our speakers for presenting.